So you get 60 seconds and 60 seconds alone to do your moaning. You cannot deviate from the subject, and it would be fabulous if you could end on a statement or a question that our lovely panel here can react to afterwards.
Bring it on.
Are you great? Let's do the countdown. 3, 2, 1, moan.
I won't tell you what you want to hear, I'll tell you what you need to hear. The British state has spent more on public services than it has taken in tax receipts for over 20 years. This situation is simply unsustainable, and that's why we need to cut back on public spending, starting with the scrapping of the triple lock on pensions. In real terms, we have seen the education, defence budgets and also the benefits budgets, apart from pensions, go down in real terms. This is unfair. Other benefits rise in line with earnings. Why shouldn't pensions rise in line with earnings? Now, pensioners, as a cohort of the population, are among the wealthiest in the country, but not all pensioners. There are about 1 million pensioners who rely on the state pension solely for their income. Their pensions should not be touched. But the remainder of pensioners who do not rely solely on the state pension should have an uplift in line with earnings rather than inflation. That is the only way that we can get public spending under control, and that's why we must scrap the triple lock on pensions.
Nicely done. OK, you've heard from Albie. He thinks that the government needs to go back on the pension promise, roll back on it. He thinks that it is the younger generation that needs more help. What do you think? Do get in touch. 0207 862 2222. I know you're going to be passionate about this one. What about on the panel, though? Marvyn, do you think this is a good idea?
It's a terrible idea.
Why?
I think we have to, as a country, be responsible for successive governments asking a country to invest in an idea and then deciding it's too expensive and then just scrapping it, as if there's no relationship between the people who have asked people to do it and now. And I think this is why people stop believing in politicians, countries, and us as a nation and what we're able to do. And those people who did invest in that system should be protected. And then we could look at a model of phasing it out if it genuinely is too expensive to continue. But this idea that we just keep bringing up this subject and threatening people with their livelihood, I think the last time we talked about this, we had people who almost wanted to cry. And it's like...
But I'm not talking about those people,
It's the saddest thing ever, where we're not responsible for the people that we are literally meant to be governing. And it takes, someone like me to be on this platform to be like, it's a terrible idea. And phasing it out is a realistic idea. But I still think it goes against the promises that were set to people. And somebody should be accountable for those changes.
Would you be happy with a phasing out of the triple lock, Albie?
Look, what I have proposed is that pensions for people that do not solely rely on the state pension should go up in line with earnings instead of the highest measure, whether or not that is earnings, whether that's inflation or CPI plus 2.5, I believe. I'm not saying the triple lock-up, I'm not saying pensions should go down year on year. I'm just saying for the majority of people who don't solely rely on the state pension,
to qualify
it's not impossible.
Like,
it's not Marvyn, I've not finished my point. Marvyn, I've not finished my point.
Okay,
Marvyn, I will finish my point and then please do respond. In the autumn statement a few weeks ago, the Chancellor said there are 1 million pensioners who rely solely on the state pension to live. I have said those pensioners should not be touched. But the other pensioners who do not solely rely on the state pension, the other millions of them, not that 1 million, their state pension should go up in line with earnings, which is the same measure which universal credit goes up in line with. Why is not what is good enough for the poorest in society not good enough for pensioners, who by cohort are the wealthiest?
And as the person who's the closest to pensionable age on this panel, I would like to also have a point to say. So I pretty much agree with almost everything that Albie has said.
Okay.
And the main thing is that the demographics have changed, that actually we are an ageing population and we have to recognise that, not just...
We were an ageing population.
No, but it has completely changed. In the last 15 years, I'd say probably within the last generation, we have actually seen life expectancy increase for both men and for women. And you've got to the point now where people who are millennials, Generation Z, could actually be living until they're 110, 120, and yet the retirement age is still sort of 60, 65. So we have to actually address this ticking time bomb right now financially. So what I would say is that actually it is about protecting those 1 million people who can only rely on the state pension. They are protected. But I think for pensioners who do have extra resources, who do have other savings, I think it isn't actually about earnings. I think it's about inflation. I think that is the key thing that undermines the economic pot that you get at the end.
And it sounds very nice when you say we're going to protect the most vulnerable, but we're going to take it away from people that have other savings. Well, people that have other savings have them because probably they worked incredibly hard, they've saved over the years, they planned for it. Now, why at this stage, when they're about to enter their pensionable age, or whether they're already in their pensions, would you take away what they were promised?
That is kind of me. I am literally at that stage.
So that's very unfair, is it not?
Well, I hate to sound like my parents, but, you know, life isn't fair. And the problem that is happening is that there is a whole cohort of the electorate, the whole cohort of people living in this country, whether they vote or not, the younger generation who are not able to afford a house, who are not able to actually get on the housing ladder and create the benefits that my generation were able to do.
Well, this is a great point.
Certainly in my generation, there are a lot of people who are asset rich but cash poor. But that goes to Albie's point, that you actually take into account what someone's individual circumstances are. The problem with the triple lock is that it is too blanket a structure, and it actually gives away more money than is actually available.
I want to get to the calls, but I'm going to put to you, Marvyn, that actually it is the younger generations that are suffering the most at the moment. We had, in the last 2 weeks, we've had an article about millennials being the hardest hit in this cost of living crisis for various reasons, and also 35-year mortgages becoming a thing. When you look at the stats, in the 1970s and 80s, it was about 4 times your income you were looking at spending in order to get a home. Today, it's near 9%. That's quite a stark difference and seems incredibly... It is 9 times the amount of your income to purchase a house. That's quite a stark difference and quite unfair on the young.
It's also absurd. It's another absurd fact. But I think there's 2 things. I think, one, this is why I'm talking about a phasing out, which is a completely different approach to this idea that it needs to stop now. And I think this sort of dismissive nature and believing that a government can sit there and say, you have too many assets, you have enough money to survive without the pension, so we're going to impact you. That's not a call you can make. If I say that I need a certain amount of money to live and survive, and then you've come in and just created a policy and a framework that says I actually have too much money, I saved up for that. I listened to you as a government and followed your rules and planned for it. So I think there is this sort of really problematic nature that sweeps out a large amount.
How do you pay for things we can't afford, Marvyn?
Such a the thing that really disappoints me the most, is that if that question would be great if there was an accountability on policies on the other side. So if I could say that introduce, I am answering it, don't interrupt me again. If you introduce policies, if you introduce policies that impact the future of this country, you as an individual should have a form of consequence. But because there's zero accountability when politicians introduce ideas, it just means all these things are done.
No, there is accountability. It's called a general election, and there's going to be one in the next 12 months.
That's not accountable enough.
You don't have that in your manifesto.
Let me finish my point.
You have that in your manifesto.
We have seen more and more politicians introduce ideas, bad management of this, bad introductions of this, and then they just go off and go and do I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, and then they go off and then enjoy their lives. While all of us are struggling with the things that they have implemented.
Okay, but I think Marvyn's disappointment is with more short-term thinking and possibly this sort of 5-year process of governments. Maybe you think it should be 10. I don't know. Derek from Leicestershire, what's your views on this? Do you think that we should get rid of the triple lock? Derek?
Yeah.
Hi there, Derek. We got you. Should we get rid of the triple lock?
Of course we should keep the triple lock. Of course it is. These pensioners, we're the people that have paved the way for what people are getting now. We're the ones that's worked 40 and 50 years, paid all the way into every sort of tax and national health, all the rest of it. We've paid that for 60-odd years. Now, you're talking about, we must look after the younger ones. Well, they can apply where they're working. If they want to earn more money, they can either put more overtime in or get a second job. I've done 3 jobs.
I hear your passion. I am going to have to come in because this isn't just a monologue, it is a conversation. I'm going to have to come in to say that, there are plenty of young people now contributing to their pensions that aren't likely to get a pension by the time they get to pensionable age. Also, when you're talking about them, they should be earning more. Well, across the board, we're not earning half as much in relative terms to your generation. And I go back to this, 4 times your income is what you would have had to have paid to buy a house. Young people now are paying 9 times their income in order to get onto that property ladder. That is a very different situation.
No. See, like I said before, the pension scheme is absolutely ridiculous. We're not paying them enough. Most other countries, a lot more than what we're paying.
True.
Okay, they'll keep saying, oh, well, take out a second one. So you got, when you retire, you have like another pension on top of that one.
A lot of those countries are actually making you pay higher tax.
Derek, you make it.
Working in certain jobs,
shouting isn't going to get you anywhere. And on that point, we're going to have to bring your mic down. And I'm going to go to Lucy on a very valid point that you make, Derek, and we hear them better when you're not shouting, is that we are not very good when it comes to pensions. When it comes to European countries, we're 16th on the list.
But quite a lot of those countries actually have a higher tax rate and therefore have a higher tax intake, and they can afford to pay a little bit more for their pension. Neither Albie nor I are saying that we should eliminate pensions for people, and yet that is sort of the response that we've been getting. What we're saying is that actually the way that pension is calculated has been too fluid in a way, and actually it needs to be just one metric. And my argument is that it should be pegged to inflation. Albie's is that it should be pegged to earnings. But either way, what we're saying is you have to allow for other sections of society that actually we are going to be an ageing population. You see this in the corporate world. You see that there is a huge concern that corporate pension schemes simply don't have enough money to pay for the length of time that people are going to be retired. And don't get me started on whether I think pension age should be actually increased.
I think it should.
Because actually, if you retire at 60 or 65, you could actually be drawing your pension for 40 years. And that, in many cases, will be the same length of time that you were working. And that is utterly unsustainable. I want to get
another call in if I can. Susan from Lancashire, what's your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are they never mention what they class as a wealthy pensioner, number one. And number two, I am past pension age. I still work and I pay quite a bit in tax. Yeah. So I doubt they're giving me very much anyway. But they never meant... Sorry.
Your first question is interesting. I want to put it to Albie. What are we classing as a wealthy pensioner? Is it just that they own a property that's very expensive? Because then you're asking them to sell or remortgage.
Look, the Chancellor was very clear in the autumn statement. There are 1 million pensioners who rely solely on the state pension to survive. Those pensioners should be protected. I think we can have a discussion about what the definition of a wealthy pensioner is, but we know what the definition of an unwealthy pensioner is, and those pensioners should be protected. But what I would just put to some of the callers is I have accepted that my generation is not going to have a triple lock on pensions. Why is it so difficult for others to accept that perhaps it's not sustainable? I've been able to accept that 40, 30 years in advance. We need to be having the conversation today.